I hope you've been enjoying this design to code challenge so far, and I'm in the main branch, but you can see that we're working on challenge number 1. Now, the way this works is you start with the start branch. That gives you kind of the basic instructions of how you need to get on, what stuff should look like. If you want to see what I did for design, you can go look at the design branch. And then finally, if you want to see kind of the code starting point, come here to the code, and this will kind of walk you through exactly what you need to do for code. If you want to see the entire project finished, go to the finished branch. This is what we're going to be doing right now. All right, you ready? Let's jump right in. Hey, what's up? My name is Chris, and welcome to Coding in Public. All right, so we're going to go ahead and code this thing out, and I've got the README up and ready, so we can see that our job is to code this out, and I've got the basic design things here already. We've got the Figma file in here if you want to look at that, or the example JPEG. When you come down here to functionality, this is the important part for the code. You can see here that when a button is clicked, focused, or hovered, it should all show that as selected in the UI. We also need to know that both buttons cannot be selected at the same time, so clicking one should untoggle the other. And finally, the UI number should update accordingly. So like when one is clicked, it should say like 6 out of 7 if that's the like, or 5 out of 7 if it's disliked, and this should be kind of the default state. And then finally, there's a Keep It 100 challenge if you want to kind of go above and beyond, where you can add keyboard event listener so you can toggle between buttons with the right and left arrow keys. So we'll do that as well. All right, so go ahead and pause the video, try this yourself, and when you're ready, play it again. All right, hopefully you had a good go of that. Let's go ahead and start with just opening up my local terminal. And in here, I'm going to go ahead and create a Vite project because I think I'm going to use React and just probably vanilla CSS here. So I'll say, let's use npm create Vite at latest, and I'll call this something like voting buttons. Okay, and then I'm going to use React, and I'll use a JavaScript SWC. SWC basically uses ESBuild behind the scenes, so it's a little bit faster, but in this case, obviously, it's not going to make a huge difference. So we'll say npm install, get everything installed and ready. And finally, npm run dev. All right, I'll command click on this to open it up. All right, so here we go. We got this thing up and running. You can see this is just a stock Vite and React app, but this folder right here is where everything is held. Now, I do need these SVGs, so I'm just going to leave these here, and I guess all this I'll just leave alone right now. Okay, so inside of here, let's go ahead and change around a couple things. I'll start in here. We'll say that this needs to be called something like voting buttons. And let's see, anything else I need to change here? Well, I guess I don't really have a favicon, but I do need to actually add some kind of link to a font. Or I could do that locally as well, but let me just come over here to the README, and here we go. We'll copy this and go ahead and open this up and remove all those here. I know I need the regular, if I remember correctly, and the bold. So I've got both of those. I can come over here now and just copy out a link here, jump back over here to my HTML. Let's drop these right in here. The other thing I'll need is this font family for the actual CSS. Okay, so I've got that set. Let's come back over here. Now we should be pulling that font in. The next thing I want to do is come into my SRC folder, and let's just kill a bunch of stuff in here. So I'm going to go ahead and kill everything in here. We'll replace this with a very simple clear. So I'll just grab all the before, and I'll grab all the after. And I'll set this to box sizing of border box, and then we'll do margin 0 and padding 0. All right, so we've got that basic thing set. You can see here it's kind of ugly, so let's go ahead and add in a body here, font family. Let's paste in that font family so it at least uses our actual font family we want. All right, next I'm going to close that down, come over here to my main.js file. Anything I need to change here? I don't think so. App, definitely we're going to change a lot of stuff in here. So let's get rid of all of this. I think I might use state here, but we can get rid of everything else in here. How about just like that? Okay, I also don't need this app CSS file because I'm just going to write everything in this index.css just because it's, a single little component. All right, so let me jump back over to the Figma file, and if we kind of think through this in steps, what I'm going to need is some kind of wrapper that wraps all of this, just like my actual auto layout did in the design. And this will have this spacing, I think it was, 24 pixels between these two? Yep, 24 pixels. Then this will be its own little section. These will all be 16 pixels apart. And then this will be its own section. These will all be 8 pixels apart. So we can kind of do this in a bunch of different ways, but let's just start with kind of scaffolding out what this should look like. Again, I'm going to open up Pastebot, which is this sequential paste thing I have, so I don't have to copy or type all this out once again. We'll just copy all the text and then add this in. So over this way, I know I'm going to want everything inside of some kind of wrapper, so I'm just going to call this container. Now we've got that top section with the text, so I'll just call this like text wrapper, something like that. And this is where we'll add in our probably H2. I'm assuming this isn't the top level of some document. So that will be, was this article helpful? Below here is where we'll have those two buttons. So for now, I'm just going to have a button wrapper div, and we'll eventually add those two things in there. We've also then got that 5 out of 6, found this helpful, and that will be something with a muted class. I think that makes the most sense to me, except this should probably be a paragraph and not a div. And then finally, outside of the text wrapper, let's see this lower container section, this would just be a paragraph, I think, with have more questions. Now this right here obviously needs to be some kind of link, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this with the link here, and for right now we'll just point this to nowhere. Okay, so I think that should work as far as the basic kind of structure of everything. I'm going to need to add the two buttons in here, and the reason I left the sidebar open is because I want to actually copy and paste these directly in here. So I'll have a button 1 and a button 2, and these will each hold an SVG. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to actually copy and paste those SVGs directly in here. So let me grab this thumbs up. We'll grab this, and the reason I'm pasting it directly in here is so I can manipulate the actual color. Now I'm going to need to change a couple things because this is in React, but for now, let's just copy and paste as is, and down here as well. All right, I think they actually might have React versions of these as well in Phosphor icons, so you may want to check that out. And I think there's actually a library, but I'm not going to install a library for 2 icons. So a couple things I'm going to do is grab all of these and hit Command-Shift-L and change these all to current color, like that, and that will allow us to manipulate the color of the actual stroke based on what the color of the text of the button is. Next, I'm going to grab all these line caps like this and hit Command-Shift-L, and I just need to change these to stroke line cap like that. Same thing here with these line joins. We'll grab all those with Command-Shift-L and change that to line join. Same thing with stroke width. So I'll grab all these with Command-Shift-L once more and change this to width. All right, now let me just double check that that worked. If I come over here, yep, that worked. Okay, and you can see how all of these changed up here and everywhere else because I kept hitting Command-Shift and L. So let's go ahead and collapse these SVGs because I don't want to muck up my entire HTML here or JSX. And now we've got these things set. Now we've got some dynamic values like this right here, and then the styling of these. So I think the way I want to do this is create some state here. I think I'll just call this total likes. And then over here we'll say set total likes. And by just tracking the likes and the dislikes, I can then basically update it dynamically and figure out what the total is so I can derive the state of the total from the likes and dislikes. So we know that to start with, we have 5 people who like it. Then let's copy this down and we'll change this to total dislikes and then set total dislikes. And to start with, this needs to be 1 because only 1 out of the 6 did not like it. All right, that means right down here, I can change this to say total likes. And then this right here, we can just do a little bit of math in here. Total likes plus total dislikes. All right, so if I refresh this, it should look the exact same, but if I change this to something like, I don't know, 10, then it should all update for me automatically. Okay, so we've got that set. We are going to need some other things on these buttons. So let's go ahead and maybe just start with that so we don't forget about them. To start with, we need an ARIA label because there's no text in here. And for this one, I'll just say like article. And let's copy this down and do the same thing down this way. Except this needs to say dislike article. Now the next thing I want to do is add another ARIA thing called ARIA pressed. We're going to use this property to both communicate with screen readers and other assistive technology and also to style our buttons. Now I don't want to have to manually control this state, so let's actually let React do it for us. So I'm going to say is liked and set that to true or false. We'll change that here in a second up top or add that in a second up top. And this will be is disliked. Okay, so right now it should yell at us because we don't have those yet. But let's come in here and we'll say is liked and set is liked. And by default, it's going to start with false. I'll copy this down. We'll do the same thing here, except I'll say is disliked and set that to false. Okay, so by default, that should be false. If I were to change one of these to true, it should now be true. So let's say that disliked is true. I should be able to come in here and see, let's see, ARIA pressed true, whereas this one is ARIA pressed false. Okay, cool. So let's change this back to false. And we can just toggle that state and basically update our UI and everything else we need. The last thing I think I'll add here is a class. So class name will be button. All right, so that's enough for me to actually style this in our CSS. So let me open up the index.css and let's go ahead and style this thing out. Now, actually, just like we did with the design file, I want to copy all of these. We're going to drag them in here, and I'm going to add these all to the root as a bunch of variables. So this one I'll call background. This one I'll call light, muted, text, and accent. All right, finally, let's add closing semicolons to all these. And there we go. Okay, so to start with, let's go ahead and add the background color for everything on the site is going to be my background. And then for my color, which would be the actual text on the site, I want this to all have my text color. Next, just to get everything in the middle, I'm going to do display grid and place items center. And then to make sure that it's the full width of the screen, or the full height of the screen, I'll say min height and set this to 100 view height. Finally, mostly for the mobile experience, let's add some padding on the outside. So we'll do like 1.5 rem. Font size, let's see, if I remember right, this was 18. So let's come back here. We'll do 18 pixels. And then for line height, I don't think we set anything in the design, but let's do something like 1.4, which is pretty typical for me. Okay, so next we've got the container. That's the whole wrapper around everything. Here I'll say display of grid. And then if you remember, things were spaced out, I think, by 24 pixels. Let's come back over here and just double check that's the case. Click on the component. Yeah, 24 pixels. So that's 2 rem, but we can just say gap 24 pixels. Now I also want everything in here text align center. So let's go ahead and just do it on the parent so that everything inherits that below. All right, we've got the container itself. If I jump back over to app, we've got text wrapper, button, all these things. So let me copy these out as well. So text wrapper, button, and muted. I think that's all we've got. Yeah. Okay, so back over this way. Let's start first of all with that text wrapper. And what I'm going to do is just add all these below so we don't forget about them, like this. And then up here, we want this to be display of grid once again. And remember, this is spaced out just a little bit differently. I think we had it at what, 16 pixels? Is that right? Let's come over here and check. 16 pixels. Okay, cool. All right, next let's go ahead and change those button icons to actually be the size they're supposed to be so we can see how the design is coming out. So I'm going to grab both of these, hit Command-Shift-L, and change this to 24. I'll come down and change this to 24. All right, next let's look at the button wrappers themselves. These are going to be stacked side to side, so for me it makes most sense to set these as display of flex. And these had a gap of 8 pixels, I believe. Now, as soon as I do that, you'll see that they're actually normally starting all the way on the left. And there's a couple of different ways to fix this. I can justify self these to the center. I could also just come over here and say like place items center. That would work as well. So maybe let's just do that. All right, let me come down here. And before we work on the button, because that will be probably the longest thing we work on, let's go ahead and just do a couple other utilities here. So maybe I even say utilities. This muted needs to be color of var muted. And then we also want to change around the normal H2. So we're going to style this our own way. And if I come back over to the README, what was that? 24 pixels. So we'll set the font size to 24 pixels. And then line height, I usually set these to like 1.1 for the headings. And I don't think we had anything specific for that in the design. So I think I'm going to be happy with that. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to actually zoom this in just a touch to make it a little clearer what we're doing, a little easier to see. Now we've also got this this anchor tag here, so let's go ahead and change this as well. So I'll set the color here to var of accent. And since this doesn't go anywhere right now, it doesn't change a whole lot, but I think, yeah, we don't have an underline either. So let's go ahead and change that. Text decoration needs to be set to none. Now, one other thing to think about when you have SVGs inside of buttons is you don't want them to click on the SVG. You want them just to click on the button. And while you can make sure to handle that in your JavaScript, it's usually also a good idea to set the SVG to pointer events of none. Okay, so I think we're mostly there. We just now need to work on the button itself. Now here, because it's an SVG inside of a button, I need to make sure that it's centered in the button. And again, my preferred way to do that is just to do display of grid and place items center. Let's go ahead and change the background color here. Let's just do transparent. And then I want to actually change the border from the default ugly thing to solid. And then if I remember right, it was the var of light. I think that's what we did. Now the border radius, because I just designed this, I remember it's 4 pixels. And the padding, I do not remember what that is. So let me come back over this way. Let's see what the padding is on one of these. 20 and 10. So 10 up and down and 20 side to side. Next, I want to make sure that this cursor is set to pointer so that when I come over here, I actually get this little pointer cursor. And then just to kind of spiff stuff up, let's make sure we add a transition. And 2 things are going to change. The color of the text, which will change the icon color because we set current color on those SVGs. And then also the border as well. So let's set border color. We'll do like 0.2 seconds. That's fine. Cubic Bezier curve. Let's steal one of these. And I'll grab this and hit comma. And the same thing, except in this case, I want to change not the border color, but the actual color. All right, next when I focus on these, I actually don't want to use the default. So I'm going to say focus. Let's just grab that state. I'll say outline of none. And there were 3 states where I wanted that to be the case. So if I come back over here, let's remember what those are. Let's see, clicked, focused, or hovered. So any of those. All right, so we've got that aria pressed attribute we can use. So let's go ahead and use an isSelector here. We can just say when this is hovered, when it's focus visible, or when it's aria pressed equals true. So any of those three states, then we want to change around two things. I want the border color to be set to my var of accent, and then I also want the color to be changed to my var of accent. Okay, so I think that's it. If we did everything correctly, let me come back over here to the app.jsx, and let's change one of these to be true. So right here, we'll say it is liked. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we know that the focus or the aria pressed works. If I come over here and hover, that works. If I tab to it, that also works. Okay, so we're getting stuff moving in the right direction. Now we just need to hook up the actual logic here. For that, I want to come over here and we're going to do a couple things. To start with, I need to have an on-click event. I'll call this something like handle like click or something like that. And then let's go ahead and write this up top here. And we'll say const handle like click. I don't think I need the event, but just in case, I'll take that. And let's do the same thing below. Let's just start with this actually. So we could combine these, I think, but I think it'll be cleaner to understand if you come back to this project if I separate out the two different functionalities. And inside here, we need to think through a couple things. First of all, I want to check if the disliked is true. So if it's already disliked, I want to flip it. All right, flip it. All right, so flip it from disliked. And then also, I want to always make sure I flip liked. Now, inside both of these, I also need to update the actual total likes. So we'll do that as well. So let's start with if it is disliked. So we'll say is disliked, and maybe let's just put this in an if statement. So I've got a little bit more flexibility here. We'll say then I want to set is disliked. Then I want to set is disliked. And in this case, I know I want to switch it to false. The other thing I want to do is set the total dislikes. I want to remove one of them. So previous will be prev minus 1. All right, so we update that. So what I'm doing here is when I first click this one, that's the only one we're handling right now, I'm checking to see if this is already pressed, which would mean this would be true. If it's true, then I want to go ahead and make it false and remove one of the total dislikes, which will also decrease my total number by 1. Because remember, they can't both be pressed at the same time. Okay, so that should be good there. Let's go ahead and flip the liked now. So the first thing I need to do is say is set is liked, and this needs to be the opposite of whatever is liked is. Now that's fine. If I come over here, this will change that and change it back and forth. But how do I update these numbers right here? Well, before I do any of this, I need to actually decide whether or not to remove or add one, because sometimes I'll be removing the is liked and sometimes I'll be adding it back in. So let's use the ternary here. And I'll say when it first comes in, if it's already liked, then I know I want to set my total likes. And once again, we'll say prev minus 1. Otherwise, I want to set my total likes to the opposite. So prev would be prev plus 1. All right, hopefully that makes sense. Let's come back over here. I'll start clicking on this. Let's refresh. I click, and now it's 6 out of 7. I click again, it goes back down. So what it's doing is, first of all, checking to see if this is disliked. It always is disliked, so it's going to skip this for now. It's going to come down here and say, hey, is it already liked? In this case, it's not. So when I click it, the first thing it's going to do is do this. It's going to add 1 extra to the total likes. Then it will flip the likes. All right, so then it'll flip it to being on like that. All right, so back and forth like that. Now, once it's already clicked, I click this. It checks this. It skips all this because nothing is liked yet or disliked yet. It comes over here and now it removes 1 because it's also going to remove it from the UI. That updates all this stuff automatically. So we can do the same thing now with the dislikes. So let me come down here this way and we'll say handle dislike, click, and I can just copy this in and come down. Let's see, let's close down this SVG so I don't have to scroll forever. And we'll say that this one should be on click, and we'll set this to handle disliked click. All right, so handle dislike click, we're going to just flip this. So we're going to say if it is liked, then I want to set is liked to false and set total likes to that. All right, and then down here we'll say if it is disliked, we'll grab both these with Command D. We'll say set total dislikes, and then finally we'll say set disliked to the opposite of is disliked. All right, hopefully that makes sense. Maybe we should have named these differently so they're a little clearer, but I should be able to click in here, and now it adds 1 here because we have an extra dislike, but it doesn't add 1 over here. If I click over here, it should check and basically disable this. This is what we worked on earlier. Switch back and forth, add these, remove them. It goes back to the default state. All right, so there we go. I think we've got the basics done. Let's come back over here and just double check. Yep, so focused, buttons can't be selected at the same time. All the UI should update. All right, so that's it for the final project, but let's go ahead and do the Keep It 100 challenge. So add keyboard event listeners so you can toggle between the buttons right and left arrow keys. All right, so to do that, we need reference to the actual buttons. So I'm going to pull in something else up here. Let's go ahead and pull in use ref like this from React. And I'm going to name both of these. We'll say like button equals use ref. And same thing here, we'll do dislike button. Now I just need to assign these. So let's come back down this way. And we'll set the ref here to liked button. And this one, same thing, except ref to the dislike button. Now I need to actually control the key press if I'm selected on either of these buttons. So what I'm going to do for both of these is add an on key down event. We'll point these both to the same thing, which will be handle key press. This will be a function we write. Let me just add these both here like this. Okay, so up top here, let's go ahead and write that. Let's see, how about we do it right below the refs? Const handle key press, and I'll make this an arrow function just like this. So for now, what we're going to do is console.log the e.key. All right, so over here, I'm going to open up the console. We'll click on this. That's fine. If I tab to it though and start hitting arrows, now you see I get them named out. Now the only two things I want to handle is right and left, which would be arrow right and arrow down, not any of these other things. All right, so let's go ahead and close this down. And the first thing I need to figure out is which key I'm actually pressing. And I can do that with the e.key, but I want to filter out anything that is an arrow right or arrow left. So let's wrap this in an if statement. We'll say if e.key equals arrow right, or if e.key equals arrow left. The first thing I want to do is e.prevent default. Now there shouldn't be any default here as far as it shouldn't move the screen one way or the other, but if I use this in some kind of UI that has some overflow, we might as well prevent that default. The next thing I need to check is which button is currently being focused. So I can grab the target, e.target, and I just want to get an attribute on it. Now let's see if there's anything unique. Didn't we have like a like? Yeah, so we have dislike and like. So I could just search for perhaps dislike, because if I search for like, they'll both be hit because they both have the word like. So let me search for dislike as an attribute. So back up here, we'll say e.target.get attribute. And the attribute I want to get is aria label. And I want to see if it .includes, because that will give me a string back, which means I have string methods available to me if it includes dislike. All right, so if that's the case, and maybe, instead of having nested if statements here, let's just do a little ternary. So down this way, if that is the case, then I want to grab the like button and I want to toggle that, right? So if this is currently focused and I hit a key, I want to focus the other one. All right, so that would be like button dot current dot focus. All right, so I'm going to focus this one over here if I'm already focused on that. Otherwise, I want the dislike button dot current dot focus, because really if they hit right or left, either way, they're trying to go to the other button. So let's see if that worked. If I come over here and tab to it, and now I hit the up key, that shouldn't do anything. Tab key, obviously that should move back. Shift tab, that should move back. What happens if I hit the right arrow? Cool, it goes that way. Now if I hit right or left arrow, it should go to the other button. All right, perfect. Now, you may have chosen to do this a totally different way. That's some of the cool things about coding, is you don't have to do it the same way. There's a way more compressed way to do a lot of this as well, and there may even be something you see that you say, hey, that's not the right way to do it. That's totally fine. I'm always a student, never the expert. Let me know what that is. But I hope this whole project was helpful to you as you built this thing out. Watching me go through it at least gave you another idea of how to do it. But either way, I hope you really enjoyed this. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Happy coding.